And meat and cheese in the heat, while delicious, sits a little bit heavy. And so you start to eat it, you're just like so excited, like this is wonderful, this is the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. And you lose track of how much summer sausage and cheese you've eaten. You don't. Oh, hello. I'm Ryan Bentley out here at the Idaho Basin in Horseshoe Bend. Today, I want to talk to you about the Owyhee River. Not to be confused of the Hawaiian Islands, although the Owyhee is named after Hawaiian trappers that disappeared out in the Owyees back in the 1820s, trying to look for some fur-bearing creatures and all, which there are many in the Owyhee to this day, and will scare you as you're paddling along, especially in early morning or the dark. That's another story. We've been running Owyhee trips in the Owyees for over 20 years now. And we do it because it's in the middle of nowhere in eastern Oregon. And just the drive itself will cause many people who spend a lot of time in cities to go, where are we even at? And we put in at a place called Rome because of its chalk hills that have eroded and reminded pioneers of the Colosseum and the Pillars of Rome, which I don't think many of them had seen, but the comparison does work quite well. We go to the Owyhee because convinced that God has a summer house out there, and through all of the remoteness and grandeur of creation creates a space that is unparalleled and be able to see who God is. And the stories that have come out of it over the 20 plus years of young people in creation in this spot and where they all meet together is incredible. It culminates with a solo time, which for most of us is terrifying. To be alone with our thoughts out in the wilderness, I'm not that good at it either sometimes. But it's incredible to see what a little bit of risk and a little bit of unknown in a beautiful place in creation can go. Oftentimes when we're out there, the verses in scripture, especially the Psalms about God walking on the wings of the wind and using the clouds as his chariots are very, very real. The wind part especially, because in the afternoon, the upstream breeze can tip boats over and that kind of stuff. And so I always chuckle when I think about that as I'm battling a headwind trying to get to camp. Oftentimes the clouds come in huge waves and big storms and that kind of thing. But at these solo times, see some of our biggest storms. I often wonder if it's not unlike the storms that showed up for Jesus and the disciples on the Sea of Galilee when Jesus calms the storm and those kind of things, because those solo times are so incredible that if I wanted to distract some young people, I would have a big storm to come along in there. And I often prayed for storms to be quieted on those solo times. But for most of these young people, maybe the first time that they've ever seen a moonrise, or just sat there and seen the stars, the handiworks of God. And it's amazing to see how young people, as they pull up into this solo time, are often apprehensive, often have not knowing and are tired. And then 24 hours when they leave, they're not the same person anymore. They've done something that is hard and scary by themselves, and often see who God is and Jesus and salvation in ways that they've never even thought possible. It's incredible. And so if you ever get a chance, you've got to come try it because it is unparalleled. Also, while you're out there on this solo time, your guides will bring you food. And so oftentimes we'll dress up, sometimes even bringing bow ties, and then you show up to camp with food. And food always tastes better when you're out in the woods. And so the looks on their faces is just spectacular. They're a little hungry. They don't know when we're gonna show up. Oftentimes we ask them not to bring their watches so they can just be present, but it can be a little torturous. So when the guide team shows up with a bunch of cheesy ravioli, you would think that we had shown up with the most decadent meal from like a 12-star Michelin restaurant, which I don't think exists, but they might on the Owyhee. And so all those things together are pretty spectacular. Some of my favorite things in life as a guide is to see people succeed as they go through rapids. My second favorite things is to see them fail in ways that is humorous, that they aren't hurt from. And my favorite thing is to watch people's ankles sail through the air, because it's often accompanied by shrieking that is really funny to me. And so I think I've matured enough in a way that I can both enjoy and then affirm and support people so that they can have a dynamic learning environment. But there's one rapid on the Owyhee called Artillery, which is always everyone's favorite. But at the end, there's this rock. And this rock has flipped more people than any rock in the entire river. And it has this particular way of flipping people where the boat hits sideways and it kind of comes up. And as you hit this rock, and I've done this many times myself, hits and flies up, the ankles fly through the air with just this body poetry that you got to see to believe. And so I've got this eddy that I hang out in as I watch people hit this rock and flip over. It amuses me to no end. And usually people get to fall out of their boats a few times. The beautiful thing about this spot to fall out is there aren't any more rocks and they float. We have ourselves a good laugh, and then we can continue on our merry little way. Often that day is also accompanied by one of our favorite meals, which we call the meat sweats, because oftentimes out there we don't have any refrigeration on these trips, and we eat a lot of tortillas and peanut butter and that kind of stuff. But we accentuate this meal or this time out there with the meat sweats, and we have summer sausage. And so it's new, it's different. It's also often very hot. So we're there chopping up all of our little summer sausages and handing out with cheese, and meat and cheese in the heat, while delicious, sits a little bit heavy. And so you start to eat it, you're just like so excited, like, this is wonderful, this is the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. And you lose track of how much summer sausage and cheese you've eaten. You don't realize that you're also being cooked out in the desert. And then pretty soon you see everybody's cheeks start to have a little sweat pop out, and they're like, this is so good. And you eat a little bit of it and you're finally like, oh no, I've had far too much. And then we all sit around, much like lions on the savannah, just kind of like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. And then we have to continue on. And so it's all these little things that add up, all these little moments that you anticipate but can't script, you pray for but don't know when it's going to show up. And again, this place of the Owyhee, could fill the whole internet with stories of challenges and ventures and how God has shown up. And maybe someday we will. But it's a place where humor and fear, unknowns and certainties can exist all together, all at once. And the reason why is because we all have huge life questions. And through silly little things like headwinds and summer sausage and alone time, they can become a little bit clearer out there in this place called the Owyhee. And maybe someday you can share an adventure out there.